Welcome everyone. Today we have our another discussion. It's about climate change and public health, and this is very important. And beside that, we are observing from different ministries as well as different organizations. They love to know more about strategy and policy. We have our world famous speaker, Professor David Smith. He is doing excellent work for the developing nations with his organizations, and he's solving different climate change, healthcare related, and many interesting problems. And already with his analysis, actually, many developing nations, government, think tanks, electronic media, they are actually asking, they love to know more about strategy. Even our youth community, they are big fan of chess. So James Foundation, hopefully soon we will organize chess courses for our youth communities. Actually, what I understand from my personal chess give a critical analytical skills, which will actually really helpful for the youth community. Climate change is the big things. We have our another speakers, Sir Shailesh Rao, with his climate change activities. He is actually doing excellent work in his communities, and we are actually representing as an audience the youth community as well as developing nation. Mr. Shailesh Rao has excellent understanding and excellent views about these developing nations. So thank you for joining today's, and we are growing with the help of our speakers, with the help of our contributions. And trust me, even I just finished a very important class in Malaysia. We have a small class, 20 students, but 20 organization, all of them are startup. They are really impressed with the contribution of our speakers. They are really love to know more about World Talent Economy Forum initiative, and they want to see more activities and different critical things come. And when I feel happy as a teacher when I see that our this open discussion they are utilizing for their organizational problem solving. So strategy is very important, climate change also very important, change also important. Let's discuss together. Professor David Smith, how do you want to analyze today's topic, climate change and public health? And you have a huge experience on policy development. What should we do? Because now we have to change many policy.
If you look at climate change as it relates to health, it's a very complex ecosystem. And, climate change really affects not only the social sides of health, but in the environmental determination of health, the clean air, safe drinking water. Is there sufficient food and food of the different types that can help your society grow? And is there secure shelter? All of those are part of the health approach that is impacted by climate. And it's kind of interesting. The World Health Organization recently said that between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause about 250,000 additional deaths per year, mainly from malnutrition, malaria, diarrhea, and heat stress. So if you begin to look at that, you can see that the food chain and public health is a very important part of the consequences of climate change. And again, the same study that they did came back and said that the damage cost to health is about $4 billion US a year that can be directly related back to climate change. And one of the big challenges you have with climate change as health is, particularly in developing countries where there's a weak health infrastructure, they're going to be really the hardest hit to be able to cope with and respond to it. And this is one of the places where our topic yesterday really comes into play, is that how do you begin to pull these different elements together, and how do they begin to work? How can you bring healthcare out to particularly the rural areas in developing nations, which are going to be hit by climate changes in ways that's not quite as apparent if I'm in a city. If I'm in a city, I know that the vehicle traffic will cause smog. It will cause things like that. It will put particulates in the air. If I'm on the rural parts of the country, that is a little less visible. And the ability to control greenhouse gases is an important part of the link between healthcare and the climate change. And we're seeing the ability to begin to do that more. As in many of the different elements and topics we discuss, to effectively put in action solutions to really tackling the problem of health and climate change head on, it is a multi-stakeholder activity. You have to include education for the broader citizens, but education for the industries that are impacted, education for the doctors. I'm on the board of one of the medical schools that was formed a few years ago. And actually within their curriculum, we have community outreach as a part of their curriculum. We have, as part of their curriculum, they have to write a software program, which I think is wonderful, because software is such an important part of public health going forward. And what's interesting with that is several of the students have written programs taking the side effects of climate change and pulling those into applications that can be used and deployed. Malnutrition is a side effect of climate change on health. And how do you begin to, in your communities, address that? With one of the countries we've worked with, we help them establish biomass power generation station. And one of the byproducts of the biomass plant is fertilizer that can go back into the farms. Another byproduct of the biomass plant is food stakes that can feed their cattle and their goats and sheep and go into that. And that is a place where smart planning, where you can, instead of putting in a natural gas generation or a coal generation or an oil generation power plant, by using biomass, it complements the region and gives them other things they need in addition to the power and in addition to the jobs. It also let them create new jobs, which will help the public health of the people, because they now can afford more and you can bring more services into it. That's an example of thinking differently when it comes to climate change and health. And that's the type of thinking we need to get the governments to do, the academic environments to do, the commercial companies in that support, and yes, the citizens, is thinking about how you begin to affect these change. And malnutrition is actually one of the easiest ones to affect. Clean air, we've got the more ways to do that. The drinking water, many parts of the world, there's still tremendous problems with that. But there are solutions that can be brought to bear. I hate to say it, but that biomass plant, with the way they do the air scrubbing and the water scrubbing as part of that, it generates clean water coming out that can be used. And it actually will take pollutants from the air, because the way the scrubbers are used to enhance the biomass generation and the heat it creates to do the functions of that. The other real important areas in that the World Health Organization says, as you look at this, is there sufficient food and secure shelter? One of the ways you get secure shelter is create an economic basis for the people to build shelter. when speakers yesterday talked about the slums of Sao Paulo, Brazil. And I'm a fellow at a university in Sao Paulo in Rio, Brazil, and have done a lot of work down there with companies like Petrobras and others. It's interesting. The slums there, some of it is a lifestyle. I visited with some folks who say, we don't want to go and maintain a place that we have to keep up. It's the same with homeless here in the United States too. There's people who will always be homeless. But you begin to make the opportunities. And what I have seen repeatedly is when you can give a family a set of money and assist them, adequate housing comes. You can't just give it to them. You have to have some stake in it. You have to have some sweat equity in it at least, or a job that is created to help provide that. And that's one of the ways you can address the impacts of the climate change. To me, we could talk about the climate change itself, what's being done. And I personally see progress in it of us applying technology to help parts of it. But I also see public sentiment helping a lot of it. The growth of EVs, electronic vehicles, particularly in shipping, is going to be a big impact as it goes and spreads globally. But even the growth of sensors, the technology called the Internet of Things, where we have small devices, sensors, actuators, other things like that, beginning to proliferate around the world, will give us the data. And once we have data, we can really begin to tackle the problem in a way that goes to root causes and not just observational knowledge. And that is one of the big things that will help us tackle the challenges around climate change. And climate change swings both ways. There's global warming, but also part of climate change is making the winters and things worse. At my home here in Texas, we broke 200-year records for days below freezing. And our power grid couldn't handle it. Our water infrastructure couldn't handle it. The wind turbines froze and stopped working because in Texas, we're not supposed to get 2 weeks of below 20-degree weather. You know, we can handle 110 degrees weather, but not 0-degree weather. And that's the other thing is climate change is not one size fits all. And it's different in different parts of the country. You know, I love my friends in New York City. When it's 85 degrees there, they are totally in a heat wave. 85 degrees here, there's people still wearing sweaters in Texas. And you see that spread across the world too there. So it's again, climate change is global, but the impacts of climate change are local, and they are unique and varying with each region. And I think this is probably a good high-level intro, and would love to hear from the others. You're muted.
Thank you, Professor David, for your excellent explanation. We have more questions we will ask you. Now I request Mr. James It and then Mr. Shailesh Rao. He is a climate change activist. I think he can give some detail from the inside. Mr. James It, so what do you want to analyze for today's topic for climate change and the public health? And how your change can help us?
Thank you, Sharif, for inviting me. Wonderful discussion. Great lead, David. Thank you very much for that. If you don't mind, Sharif, I'll defer to our expert from the Climate Healers because of internet connectivity. I've seen him drop off before. I want to make sure we hear from him. So I'll go afterwards.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Mr. Jamsid. Mr. Shailesh Rao, yes.
Thank you, Sharif, and thank you, Professor Smith, for that explanation. And thank you, James, for deferring to me. Actually, my internet connection has improved since we last met. So I see, we are in a climate emergency. This is not just climate change. It's going to go on slowly. This is an emergency because we have triggered a number of positive feedback loops that are running out of control. And so when one of my first projects when I was finishing my bachelor's in India was in nonlinear circuit analysis. And I knew at that point that, in my circuits, I could see you can dial the voltage up. At some point, you see the nonlinear phase transition happening. And if you immediately return it back, it's okay. It'll come back to the original state. But if you let it go, it just goes haywire. And when it reaches the other state, assuming that there is another state, sometimes it just goes off and then the whole thing melts. Okay. If it does reach another state, then to pull it back to the original state, you have to bring it way below where it made the transition. So there is hysteresis in any nonlinear feedback loops, even assuming that there is another state that the Earth will go to and stay there. That's also not clear whether that's true. We may be in a Venus syndrome if we continue this nonsense. Okay, so I'm saying we need to be treating this as if it is an emergency. It's a public health emergency. Okay, climate change is a public health emergency. And therefore, we should be doing everything in our power to reverse climate change. Not just stop it, not just assume it's going to continue for the next 50 years and then figure out how we are going to deal with people, because we don't even know how it's going to progress. Okay, we need to figure out everything we can do right now to reverse climate change. And to me, climate change is just a reaction from nature for the war on nature that we have been conducting in the global industrial civilization for the last 400 years. We've been conducting a war on nature. Okay, we've been saying, how do we exploit nature for our consumption and to continue our consumption? And so to me, we need to admit that the war on nature is a monumentally bad idea. It has always been a bad idea. And now we need to figure out how to be in alignment with nature, how to help nature heal the climate. Because nature is the best supporter we have if we let her heal the climate. And so for that, the number one thing we need to be doing is shut down the killing machine. We have a killing machine that's killing 80 billion land animals, 1 to 3 trillion sea animals every year, and we're destroying 10 billion old growth trees every year and countless new growth trees. And not only that, we're also killing 40 million human beings every year from avoidable diseases. This is the killing machine of animal agriculture, the killing machine that is driving our economic growth paradigm. So we need to understand that the growth paradigm has got to end. This is it. We can't grow anymore. So we need to change the way we design our civilization. We need to change the way we organize ourselves as human beings. It's all hands on deck, and reorganize everything that we know as the normal way of living. Okay, because we are, fundamentally we are like any other species, but we play games and we tell stories in order to coordinate our actions among billions of us. And money is a game. It's a story that we have been telling. It's a game we are playing. And the game has rules that are so, it's so ridiculous that we keep playing the same game over and over. It's not that we designed this game. We inherited this game from our ancestors. and they inherited it from their ancestors. It's a game that we've been continuing to play over and over. And I'm saying it's time for us to rethink that game. So I've written a paper called Engineer Solutions to Scientists' Warnings, because I'm an engineer, and as engineers, we look at solutions. We don't just warn people, this is what's going to happen. Yeah, we know what's going to happen. Then we say, how do we solve it? Okay, and we have come up with 7 strategic actions that humanity needs to be taking right now. First is education. Education. Tell people, look, we are in a climate emergency. This is what's happening. We can't even predict what's going to happen in the next 10 years. Forget 30 years or 50 years. Okay? And because we don't understand nonlinear feedback loops very well. And no one does. If anyone pretends that they do, trust me, they don't know what they're talking about. So given that, we need to say, okay, first we need to educate people. And secondly, we need to tell them that going vegan is the equivalent of wearing a face mask for the planet. That's what we are doing when you go vegan. It's just the least you can do to help the planet is to go vegan. That releases almost 80% of the land surface of the planet to be returned back to nature so that she can start healing. Because, if the forests come back, the ocean recovers, this carbon can get sequestered. So I'm estimating that at least 34.5 gigatons of CO2 can get sequestered every year if the world goes vegan in recovering forests. So fundamentally, we wrote a paper, it got published in the Journal of Ecological Society, showing that if you take that into account, animal agriculture is responsible for at least 87% of greenhouse gas emissions. If you take into account the opportunity cost of the land that's currently being used for animal agriculture. Okay. So every time we eat a meal and we eat animal foods, we are basically saying we don't want the planet to heal. We'd rather continue. So that's a choice we're making. Every day we make that choice as to whether we want the planet to heal and climate change to be reversed, or we want the climate change to continue and the planet to get destroyed. So that's a choice we're making every day. So we can make the right choice. If we make the right choice, we can let nature heal, right? So when we take that into account, I'm saying, shutting down the killing machine should be number 1 on our list of things to do. Because when the planet is dying, why do we have a killing machine running around killing the planet? Doesn't make any sense, right? As a species that we are continuing this. So that's number 1. Number 1 is education. Number 2 is we need to petition the UN to drop goal number 8 in the Sustainable Development Goals, because that's the goal that's economic growth. So what's happening is that we have these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and every nation is pretending to meet all of them by just focusing on economic growth. So the story we're told is just grow the economy and all the other goals will be solved. And I'm saying absolutely not. And we have done this many times. That goal number 8 is redundant goal. And in engineering, when you have a redundant goal, the first thing you do is to throw it away because you don't need it. Because if we meet, no poverty, goal number 1, zero hunger, goal number 2, good health and well-being, goal number 3, who cares if some number is growing? Some GDP is growing. Who cares? So it's the game of money that's forcing us to grow the economy, because that's the rule. Those are the rules we have set up in the game of money. Okay. So I'm saying, okay, let's admit that that's the game that's ruining us. And let's say that we're going to pretend, right? We just print money and give it to people. Who cares? This is in fact what the governments are doing now, right? They're printing money left and right and giving it away to people. So let's continue that. And let's stop this goal number 8. Replace goal number 8 with goal number 18. Goal number 18 is Claire Smith has come up with this goal saying zero animal exploitation should be a goal. So that will force all of us to think vegan, think vegan, go vegan. So zero animal exploitation should be goal number 18. That we need to replace goal number 8 with goal number 18, because goal number 18 would make all the other goals easy to meet. Okay. And then third thing we are saying we should do is address goal number 2 first. Let's meet it. Let's meet goal number 2, zero hunger. And let's meet it with making healthy, immune boosting food easily available to every human being on the planet. All plant-based, whole foods, plant-based meals, easily available to everyone on the planet. Because all of us have to get healthy. We are all malnourished. A lot of us are malnourished. Okay, even in the West, 70% of people in America are overweight or obese. That's malnourishment. Their bodies are saying, "You're not getting me enough nourishment. That's why you have to eat more and more and more." Okay, so it's not just the people who are going hungry who are malnourished. The people who are going overweight and obese are also malnourished, because we have flooded our system with bad food, calorie-rich and processed foods. This is what Dr. Michael Greger calls it. Calorie-rich and processed foods are crap foods. Okay, and so this is what our industry has been producing, because we have a system in which we have to addict everyone into compulsive behaviors in order to keep growing our economy. So let's acknowledge that that's what we've been doing and say, okay, now we need to change, and therefore make healthy, immune boosting food easily available to everyone. So this is a public health emergency, and this is what we need to be doing. Okay, that's the third action. The fourth action is all of us have to get together and figure out a new way of organizing ourselves. So I call it the new constitution for planet Earth, in which human beings become a caretaker species and not a predator species. We currently think we are the top predator species. No, we are not. We're killing ourselves. We're just eating ourselves up. So let's become the caretaker species of the planet, and let's take our role. Our role should be to maintain the climate on the planet. Okay, so that it is healthy for all and all life on the planet. Okay, so all animals should be thanking us for maintaining the climate on the planet. So let's switch it around. Instead of being a predator species, let's become a caretaker species, and that requires a new constitution in which we are organizing ourselves around ecosystems, around watersheds, not around national boundaries. I mean, these are artificial boundaries that some fellow wrote on a map, So why are we still sticking to those things? So that's action number 4 I'm saying. Action number 5 is to create a new money game, a new economic game. I call it the game of Aquarius. It's a game in which we play that game, and we automatically ensure that we stay within the bounds of the planet, the ecological limits of the planet. And we can create a game like that, in which we play the game, and we guarantee that we are within the ecological bounds of the planet, and we guarantee that every human being has their basic needs met by the community. Okay, so that's the game of Aquarius, number 5. And number 6 is we need to get all the religions together and do a common spiritual initiative in which we are looking for happiness within, as opposed to looking for happiness in consumption. Okay? So if we don't do that, just one person's need, one person's greed is enough to destroy the planet. Okay? So one person can say, I need it all, otherwise I'm still not happy. And then they can destroy the planet. So we need to be looking for happiness within ourselves, not outside. So we have some fundamental flaws in our model, the axiomatic flaws. So we need to fix that, and that requires a spiritual initiative from the religious community in the world. And finally, we need to regenerate the planet. So we need a new ecological initiative to restore watersheds, to restore the forests, rewild the planet and all the land that will be released when we all go vegan. Okay, so I'm saying this is the time for all of us to sacrifice, so to speak, or sacrifice our consumption of animal foods, and actually discover when you sacrifice, you're actually getting better. Your health gets better, the planet gets better around you, everything gets better. And when we eat animals, we're really literally eating ourselves. So anyway, I'm complete. Thank you so much for letting
Thank
me.
you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Mr. Shoileshra, for your excellent analysis on climate change. And definitely, we are creating more awareness with this discussion. And now I request Mr. James Eid. After that, we will go for some question answering session.
Thank you again, Sharif. Wonderful topic, wonderful panel. I'm definitely sorry that I conceded my time because I don't want to follow what I just heard. That was amazing, amazing. And I always say, start with yourself. And what I'm hearing is start with yourself. Change your diet, change how you treat yourself, and then your community, and then who knows where it'll stop from then. And then take the planet that we all live on as the mother that it is, that it provides life, and if we poison her, we poison us. So it's it's a wonderful new definition of capitalism for me is the making everyone addicted to compulsive behavior. That's something I wrote down from what I just heard, and it's a new way of looking at it. I also heard before that it's about scarcity rather than abundance. That was also something that I've carried around since listening to Charlize, and I think that these are things that is part of education. I'm learning on these shows, and so education is number one. We have to become more aware of the effects that our behaviors have on ourselves, on our communities, and on our planet that we all share. We're all in this together. So we're not going to save this. So I'd like to get back into the definition of terms. What are we talking about on climate change? Well, I pulled up a random definition, and it's a change in global or regional climate patterns. In particular, a change apparent from the mid to late 20th century onwards and attributed largely to the increased levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide produced by the use of fossil fuels. That's just one definition. But even before that, we had this industrial age, industrial revolution. And in London, the factories, the output from the factories caused the local weather to change into what they described as the London fog. Became so unhealthy to breathe. They said it was like trying to breathe pea soup. And so what did the rich do? They moved away. They moved outside. And so it was only the labor, the people that were doing the work, that had to breathe that air. And so what we're talking about now is there's no place to move to escape this. So the London smog but that was one lesson that we still failed to learn from. And that was long ago. The evidence is overwhelming. So we have climate change deniers. Well, I'd say, don't waste your time trying to educate them. They just aren't going to accept reality. But there are people that you can influence, that you can turn around their thinking and changing not only their minds, but their hearts, so that they think of themselves as stewards of the planet rather than consumers of the planet. So I think these are very, very important and very attainable goals. These are things that we can do, that we will meet resistance. We will meet with people who want things to stay the same. And they have strong arguments, powerful forces, and a lot of dark money behind them. So these are the things that we cannot be discouraged by. We must continue to struggle onward, to fight against the naysayers, the people who say, no, things are fine. No, things are not fine. It is an emergency. We are reaching the point of no return. I wanted to start yesterday. It's too late about yesterday. Start today. And how do you start changing yourself? If you're living on Big Macs today, you can't really go vegan tomorrow without making yourself very sick. So, but what can you do? What I did was I looked at I thought of it as a bizarro Catholic way of looking at it. Eat meat only on Friday. Just reduce your consumption. Start healthy way and change your behavior slowly but surely. And and I would say, eventually my goal is to not just eat vegetables, but just fruits. And am I there yet? No, I am not. But that's my goal. That's what I'm working towards. And change your behavior. Slowly at first, don't do anything too radical that'll disrupt your system, but you can make slow changes over time that make a big difference in the long run. So these are the things I want to say. And, we have these people that say, okay, climate change has always happened. And so don't blame it on mankind. Climate change has always happened. Well, these type of thinkers are begging the question. Yes, climate change has always happened. In the past, we had ice ages, for example. That's true. But has man made a difference in climate change? And you're begging the question if you ignore that. And the answer is yes, man has. Man has dumped an incredible amount of pollution into our atmosphere, into our rivers, into our water, into our drink. We have toxins that we never had before. And it has had an effect, not just on the local weather patterns in London, but on the world. My goodness, and we had these people saying, it's okay to dump your industrial waste into our rivers. It's creating jobs. Marvelous. It's creating jobs and poisoning the flora and fauna downstream. Who's paying for the environmental cost of that? Who's paying for the people who are getting cancer treatments because of that? Well, it wasn't until one of our rivers caught fire that we started to really pass policy to change this. And, water boils, it doesn't burn. How did the river catch fire? It wasn't the water that was burning. It was the industrial waste we were dumping into it. And people have to start paying a price. So we passed policies that said you can't do this. And if you do this, you're going to pay this exorbitant price to do this. So now we have islands of plastic in the ocean. When is enough enough? When will we wake up? Islands don't form out of plastic unless man is doing it, and man is doing it. So are we going to wait until the oceans burn? When are we going to wake up? I say wake up yesterday, but yesterday's behind us. So wake up today. These are important things that I think that we can't emphasize enough. And there are forces at work here. I love the idea that we don't understand this feedback loop. It's like Professor Feynman once said about quantum mechanics: if it doesn't make you dizzy, you don't understand it. But there are forces we cannot detect, let alone measure, at work here. So we are playing with forces beyond our control. So these are the things that we can do to prevent these things spiraling out of control, reaching another state that may not be sustainable for life. I think it's quite realistic to talk about the Venus effect. It doesn't have to be exactly like Venus, but enough to cause mass extinctions that we're already seeing. This isn't just something we're pretending is happening. It's happening, people. Extinctions are happening. And will mankind be one of them? Well, maybe technology will, insert itself in a magic way, and, we'll have artificial lungs so that we can breathe the poisoned air. And we'll have artificial eyes so we can see through it. And, artificial everything. So we don't become Homo sapiens then. We're Homo roboticus or something different. Maybe that's our evolutionary path if we do nothing. So, do you want to stay Homo sapiens a little bit longer? Start taking some action, change your behavior. Start with yourself. Change what you can today. And a little bit at a time goes a long way, believe me. And so I think that might be all I wanted to talk about. Oh, the last thing I want to say is that there's what's happening now in California is almond growers, and almonds use a lot of water. So water is one of those things that should be abundant. Water is life, but it is becoming scarce. And so almond growers no longer find it profitable because water costs too much to feed the almond trees so that they can grow, they can sell the almonds. So what are they doing? They're selling their water instead of the almonds. This is happening today in California. This is crazy, people. We must do better. Thank you, Sharif. This is a wonderful discussion.
Thank you. This is really, really great discussion, especially based on the present climate change situation and public health situation. I have few questions. I want to start from Professor David Smith. I think Professor, actually, I love to learn more. Even our audience, sure, they love to learn more. What is the relation in between climate change as well as public health? And my second question is how we can create better policy for climate change and public health.
Wow, that's a great question. I almost want to pull up a slide that I have found on another source that is a great way to help frame that. Let me go back and see if I can do that. Hang on. This is a great little slide, and I think you can see it now, where you see the effects of climate change with increasing CO2 levels, raising temperature, raising the sea levels, a more extreme level. You begin to see it. It's an air pollution. It changes in the vector economy, allergens. It begins to look water quality, feed and supply impacts, environmental, extreme heat and severe weather. Then this factors out and really begins to look at the heat-related illnesses, death, the impact on your cardiovascular, the forced migrations, the civil conflict. Climate change does impact mental health. We know it does asthma. You see changes in malaria, the different types of fevers, the West Nile virus, and others really come back and have a direct impact. And again, we talked about earlier, the malnutrition, the color, other things like that. This is a great way, I believe, to look at how the genesis of climate change with the impacts going out in different categories and how those are interacting with you. And you can begin to see by such a simple graph the impacts it would have on regulation and other things for impacting what it is we're doing. Let me come back to here. The impacts of what we're doing. And I believe you begin to see this work really in concert with what you're trying to do. I love the fact that she is an engineer. I had the privilege of co-leading the very first semiconductor roadmap ever done. And when I was an executive at Semitech, a consortia pulled together of all the major North America semiconductor companies and suppliers. And some of our objectives there were real interesting as we went through the roadmap. One of the roadmaps is, for example, some pretty bad chemicals are used in semiconductor manufacturing. Our goal was for them not to leave the facility. A lot of water is used. Our goal is the water to leave purer than it was when it entered the facility. And we began to do those as we implemented the roadmap. And you begin to see that going. I also had the privilege to lead a high energy density storage roadmap for the military. And it's particularly important as we move away from fossil power into other things. You've got to be able to store high densities of energy and actually generate high density energy through other sources too, such as wave action and other things where you have the appropriate capabilities. That particular roadmap went out 50 years, so we're still in the midst of implementing parts of that. But those are the types of road mapping that can be done to help communities, governments, commercial companies, even like we did with the semiconductor industry roadmap, entire industries to be able to enact change. A roadmap is a great way. Too many people, and I apologize for this comment, particularly engineers, see a roadmap as a single line. It's not. If you think about when we take a trip in a car, we want to go, well, where do we do the side versions? Do we want to go to this part? Do we want to go to this attraction? Other things like that. Oh, the road's under construction. Should we take an alternate path? Where do I, if I'm in an EV, where do I have power stations I can plug in and recharge? And because it takes a amount of time, what can I do while that's going? That is a roadmap as well. A roadmap has choices to take. A roadmap has decision points. A roadmap gives you options for different steps. What works in India, what works in the United States, might not be appropriate in Australia or in Brazil. And a well-done roadmap gives you those options. Let's go just within a country. What I do in India might be appropriate for the cities, but not for the rural parts of India. It might be appropriate for North India, where I have more water, and not as appropriate for South India. And so having the communities, having the states produce roadmaps around the intersection of health and climate change is a great step for local governments to do. And as you do a roadmap, you do processes where you look at impact analysis. I personally use a technique called an impact wheel. That is a great way to get collaboration working on how you begin to do these things and what are the unintended consequences. I have done impact wheels where we're out on the third, fourth level, and all of a sudden you get aha moments. Gee, if I just make this change here, it will change these impacts over here. And climate change and health is one of those, where many instances, things that are not apparently connected are connected. And you have to begin to do exercises where group intelligence is brought to bear. I have an approach that I love to use, and at the high level, it's called 6 views of the future. You take an extrapolator view, engineers. You take a pattern analyst view, traditionally more like scientists. You take a goal analyst view, a counterpuncher view, a intuitor view, and an artist view. And there's different techniques under each one of those. But if I begin to use a technique like these 6 views of the future, what it does is it helps you cancel out error. And that is really important because one of the biggest mistakes I've seen companies make, that I've seen governments make, is they've only used 1 or 2 views. A good example is when Iridium was launched as a satellite communication system. Motorola primarily used an extrapolator view. Here's my 3 data points, let me draw the line through, and that's what's going to happen. And they ignored looking at patterns. They ignored looking at what perception was. They ignored looking at competing technologies. They ignored looking at a counterpuncher's view of what was coming in the pipeline and the other elements that can do it and what the scenarios were around it. Climate change and health is a complicated enough multi-system that you need to take an approach that pulls into account all these different views of the future and the different stakeholders. You know, we talked about stakeholders earlier. I've got to include the citizens. I need to include the government. I need to include academia. And I need academia at all levels, from very early education through advanced research, postdoctorate level. And I need to include the commercial in companies. in pulling these together to address that and build the roadmaps to successfully tackle the different parts of the problem statement. So that's a long way, I think, which goes towards how I would answer your question, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really great answer for us. There is a specific question from audience. Mohammed Sohail Rana, climate change and public health. What the major difference? Mr. Shailesh Rao, as he's it's a subject matter expert. So if you give the answer.
Yeah, thank you, Sharif. And thank you, David, for the 6 views. In fact, I'm a systems engineer, and I tend to look at multiple views to figure out what the appropriate response should be. And, it is it is fundamentally about getting us to switch to reverse what we are doing right now. Okay, so to me, I see it as like, imagine that you're in a car and you're driving 90 miles an hour and you round a bend in the road and you see a concrete wall in front of you. Should we at that point say, oh, I love to keep my foot on the accelerator, I love the feel of the wind in my hair, and so I'll keep pressing the accelerator? Or should we take your foot off the accelerator and put it on the brakes? And so that to me is veganism. Okay, to me, it's just a simple step. It's a simple, rational response to what I see in front of me. Because if you look at the rate at which we are destroying wildlife, we destroyed 52% of wild vertebrates between 1970 and 2010. And that became 58% by 2012 and 68% by 2016. So you see the trend. We know we are going to be hitting 100% by 2026 if we continue along that. In that case, extrapolation is a valid technique to use, right? I can't say there are multiple views to that. There is only one view. We are going to 100%. That's because we as human beings are really good at finding the last remaining fish and killing them because somebody wants to eat it for $10,000 or $100,000. Okay? So when we do that, we're going to kill ourselves. So knowing that, I say we need to be promoting a plant-based world, a vegan world, as quickly as possible. And I'm saying definitely by 2026, because if we don't do that, we can kiss this planet goodbye. It's as simple as that. I don't see projections of 20 years and 30 years and 40 years as valid at the moment, because we don't even understand what's happening in the next 5 years. If we get to 100% loss of wild vertebrates by 2026, what the heck are we projecting beyond that for? We're done. We're done. So knowing that, I say this public health, seeing climate change and public health as one and the same. There is no difference. Climate change is a public health issue. It's just like COVID-19. Okay? For COVID-19, we made everybody wear masks, and we are now persuading everybody to get vaccines. So we need to do the same thing for climate change. We need to get everybody to transition to veganism. I mean, we have all been mass addicted. Okay? This because that's the business model we have used in our economic system so far. Addiction is the business model. And so we have all been mass addicted. So we need to help each other overcome this addiction. Overcome this addiction to bad foods that are making us sick, to bad ways of living that are killing us. Why are we being bombarded still with 3,500 ads a day? Because we are still in the old model. We still think that happiness comes from outside. This is a foundational axiom that is false. The axiom of consumerism is false. Okay? So we have two false axioms that are driving the current economic system. The axiom of consumerism, which says that the pursuit of happiness is best accomplished by stoking and satisfying a never-ending series of latent desires in human beings. And the second is the false axiom of supremacism, which is that life is a competitive game in which those who have gained an advantage may possess, enslave, and exploit animals, nature, and the disadvantaged for their pursuit of happiness. These are false axioms. This is like saying the sun goes around the earth. Okay? As long as we keep believing the sun goes around the earth, we'll never get our scientific revolution going. In the same way, as long as we keep believing these two false axioms, we will never get to a sustainable civilization. Never. Because you cannot found, you cannot base a sustainable civilization on falsehoods. Because nature is always giving us consequences for our actions based on reality, based on what is the truth. So we need to change these two actions. And the axiom of inner peace is what pursuit of happiness is best accomplished by looking for it within ourselves. Okay, the self-mastery rule, I call it. And the second is the axiom of Homo Ahimsa, which is that all life is one family, and we each bring our unique gifts to give all we can, receive all we need, and become all we are. And so now we need to create a game that implements these two axioms, these two correct axioms. We need to create a game like that. If we don't do that, we're just talking. We're not doing anything. Okay, so I say that fundamentally, all of us should be working on creating this new game that we can play. And we can create this game in a way that we can play two games simultaneously, the old game of money and the new game of Aquarius. And then over time, we say we don't need the old game of money anymore because we have figured out Aquarius works for us. But until then, we need to play both games. So there is a way in which we need to transition. And so this also is systems engineering. It is how do we get from where we are to where we need to be? We currently, I treat this as Spaceship Earth. Spaceship Earth is being designed and navigated by lawyers and economists who don't understand engineering. Okay, this is like saying let lawyers and economists design a spaceship to Mars. You will never get there. You'll never get there because they won't know how to do it. So unless we have some systems thinking behind our transition and behind where we need to go, I'm sorry, you're not going to get there. So it doesn't matter how many views we have. Okay, so that's what I bring. Okay, from my limited perspectives, this is what I bring. I bring a 10,000-foot view. I was responsible for creating Gigabit Ethernet, which is now running this connection. Without it, I won't be on the internet right now. And that required looking at every possible interference that could happen on that cable and figuring out how to overcome them. So that's systems thinking that needed to go into that. So anyway, thank you. I'm complete.
Thank you. Mr. Jamsid, what's your view for different kind of developing countries? How we can work together for this climate change and for better healthcare system?
Well, Sharif, I think I've already heard a lot of wisdom, and I'm partially reluctant to follow the wonderful knowledge of David and what Sharif just said, but I'm also confident enough to do so. And what I'm going to say is I want to learn more about this game of Aquarius because I do think this is a great way to put it. We're playing a dumb game where the house always wins, and for a little blink of an eye, you might go on a winning streak, but in the long run, you will lose. Keep playing, you will lose. So we're playing a loser's game. And so we got to wise up, smarten up, and play a different game. And if we don't, you end up bankrupt. You end up without any chips. You don't get to play anymore. So David is so understated and so wise, and I just want to put a little bit of emotion into this. We have got to respond, or they take our chips away, and we don't get to play anymore. We go extinct, and it's we should have started yesterday, but we can't. We have to start today. Start today and start with yourself. Now, this game that we want to play in the future is not going to be, the answer is not outside of ourselves, it's in ourselves. Look inward. Look inward for inner peace. You cannot get it by buying something. There is no one that's selling anything that will give it to you. You must find it on your own by looking inside yourself. Change the way you behave. When you find that peace, what makes you agitated? Don't do that. What makes you serene? Do that. These are the inner signs that will tell you you're doing the next right thing. You know, the addiction, the compulsion to purchase, to consume. That, and then we think, well, I bought this car, I thought it would make me happy, but now there's a better car out there, and now I want that car because that will make me happy. And it turns out it never makes you happy except for a short time. You can go on a short winning streak, but in the game, you're playing a loser's game. The house always wins, and you never do. Now, you know, we think about the sense of spirituality in our decision making, and people go, "Oh, spirituality, blah blah blah." You know, yeah, but they believe in an invisible hand. You know, come on, guys, what's this invisible hand? And it seems to me the invisible hand is only working for 1% of the population. So, you know, if it exists at all, you know, it's not working for everybody. So I think we need to start imagining things in a new way, and stop playing by the old rules, the old game, the rules of an old game that obviously isn't solving what's the real problems, the reality. Face reality. The reality is we're at an extinction level event. And can we change in time? Maybe, maybe not. I choose to believe optimistically, perhaps, that we can. But it's going to take concentrated effort, concentrated will, concentrated unity. And that means that we have to stop looking at the borders that artificially divide us. And it doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. We're all in this together. And until we start replacing that, the current mindset of us versus them with us together, you know, I think we might have a reasonable chance of falling short and going extinct. So wake up, change. Change is nothing to be afraid of. If you're making any decision based on fear or shame or societal pressure, it's going to be suboptimal. So make it with confidence. Have confidence that you can do this, that we can do this together because we're in it together. This climate change is not a weather pattern. It's not how much did it rain today. It's not how much did it snow today. No, it affects entire regions. What we're seeing in the Pacific Northwest right now is an incredible hot streak, an unprecedented hot streak of days that are just beyond imagining hot in that area. They just don't experience it. Well, if you look at what the forces are, it's the conditions of the Arctic versus the subtropical. These changes in their temperatures are producing these fields that are preventing the normal jet stream from moving air across. So it's all very complicated to understand, but you cannot deny it. You cannot ignore it. And if you study it, and if you don't want to study it, if you can't afford to study it, pay attention to the people who have and who are telling you. Some of them are shouting, some of them are just calmly speaking to you. But pay attention to the people that know what's going on, have figured out what's going on. So I'd listen to David, I listen to Shalish, and I learn. So that's what we do. If we are open to learning new behaviors and changing our current behaviors, we have a fighting chance. And as a chess player, that's all I want, a fighting chance. We play by the same rules. So Sharif, wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is really, really valuable conversation for our youth community, for our policymaker, for our corporations. World Talent Economy Forum, we are working for making a collaborative partnership in between government, corporations, and academia. So hopefully our relationship will solve many of the problems.
Hopefully Sharif will come right back in. Is there another question that we haven't answered that we should talk about? Oh, there he is. Okay.
We lost you for a minute, Sharif.
Okay. Mr. James, you want to add any point or something?
Oh, no, I was just asking if there was any question that we hadn't answered while you were temporarily.
No. Already we covered all of the question answers, and thank you for joining today's sessions. And we are working with government corporation as well as academia. So hopefully with our collaborative partnership, we can solve many problems. And you people are the hero for our developing nations, because we are trying to World Talent Economy Forums trying to producing new heroes, because we have many heroes from movie, heroes from sports, heroes from, but we need more scientists, more activists as a good, as an example for our youth community when they are set their priority that I want to be like Mr. Shailesh Rao, I want to be like Mr. Jamsid, or I like to be like Mr. David Smith. That is the real change. That is the real change. We need more scientists, more responsible people, and we need real hero, not for this media and other things. We need real hero, those who are working for the society, those who are working for their communities. So Professor David Smith, Mr. James Seed, and Mr. Shailesh Rao, thank you. It's an excellent discussion. It's a very good input for our youth community. Thank you. Bye bye and take care. And hopefully we will see you soon. Bye bye.